Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on how to future-proof your job in the age of automation. My name is Nageeb. I am the COO of a software consultancy based out of Calgary. And with me is Sharmin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nageeb. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. My name is Sharmin Surani, and I am a talent and career specialist with SAIT, School for Advanced Digital Technology. So let's get started. In order to really understand, let's break down future-proof job and the age of automation. In order to really understand how we can future-proof our job, we should first understand what is this age of automation? What does it mean? How did it come to being? Why is it such an important thing that we're talking about today? And so forth. So where did it start? What is automation all about? As it sounds, automation, but it also started with a lot of people trying to, in our everyday lives, at our work, what we're trying to do is we're really trying to solve a problem. We always want to find a better solution for whatever we do. We are shopping grocery, we want to find a better solution to do that. We are trying to connect with our peers in communication and better communicate with them. We have another technology to do that. And therefore, in order for everything we do, we want to do it with better impact and support our customers and our work and staff to be able to better bring out the results. And to do that, we found a way through technology and through automation. And that's why, of late, you must have noticed that tomorrow is all about this thing called digital transformation. Basically, where did it start? What is it all about is something that we're going to talk about in the presentation today. To start off with, really the past has taught us that technology has an extraordinary capability to redefine efficiency, such as switching from computers to laptops, made it possible for the employees to work from anywhere in the world. Very recent, up until a couple of years ago, we only saw a couple of profession people working from home. Today, with the pandemic, we are now seeing that a lot of us ended up working from home. So is this something that is going to continue tomorrow? Is what we ask the experts and ourselves, and a question that a lot of you must have noticed your clients are being asked at their organizations. Technologies such as Zoom that we're recording this video on, Microsoft Teams and so forth are being extremely important today. And communication platforms like Slack have taken a significant increase in demand and the usage. The buzzword, digital transformation, really it doesn't really have a specific definition, but what it is that it's any technology that is helping improve businesses, the business work, business efficiency, and productivity. At the end of the day, all business want to serve their customers in the best way possible and make their employees work as easy as possible. Cutting costs, increasing profit has been a continuous need of an organization. And what digital transformation is doing is exactly that, to help businesses with that. Meaning, to difficult every organization, technology plays a very key role in this digital transformation. And that's why the word digital has been attached to this new transformation. The change. So basically, what is happening with the word transformation, another word for it is really the change. We are noticing significant change in a lot of different ways of working, the way businesses are working, as the staff that is working, and the pandemic can clearly show us that we've noticed that clear change that's coming, which was supposed to come. It's just happened really fast. And a lot of people might even like to call it evolution of the way we work, the way we do businesses, and even the way we continue with our everyday lives. An expert really, i.e. Insight, really talked about 5 ways in which this change has shown significant growth and impact on us and our everyday lives and our working lives. The first change is really new behavior, social media, web technology, and so forth. And businesses went really online very quick. and continue to use social media for a lot of communication with their stakeholders. I remember I worked with an organization, and basically the organization was was very slow in adapting the technology. And when I joined, it was social media was not a thing, but social media was a thing with their competitors and outside world as well. And therefore, when we were asked in our marketing meeting that, do you have any suggestions on what we could do to really, improve our and reach our clientele? Where are they? Like, we were noticing the report shows that there have been several people that have lost jobs, need help with jobs, but we are unable to reach these people. What is it that we're missing, and how can we do this better? A couple of us really talked about, well, we are communicating with a lot of people, but it seems like clients love to communicate online. And that's when we thought about social media. Social media has changed the way that we now communicate with our clients and really engage them with us, and not just a one-off communication. That led to a significant increase in clientele and the company adapting social media platform. The clients were really thankful for being able to reach them, because they were trying to find us and we were trying to find them. Work culture is another thing that has significantly changed. The expectations and the style of work. What do we mean by expectations? What do we mean by style of work? Basically, there's a significant boom that tomorrow that there's going to be a significant high number, about 71% of the workforce is going to be millennial. And if that's the case, then how are they going to, what is their style of work? What is the change that they're going to bring to the workforce? Our conversation with my communication with a lot of employers have brought in some interesting conversations around, okay, what is the style of work? So think about a person A and a person B. Both, I went to a recent event in, it was a tech event, and this organization talked about what expectations they have from the new staff and their current staff that they're working with, and how do they expect them to work. Back in the day, when you asked, okay, there was a person A and a person B and a person A, both of them are given a task and given a 2-week deadline to submit that task. However, person A decides that, okay, well, I've been given 2 weeks. I'm going to make sure that in 3 days I complete part A of the task. Another 3 days I'm going to dedicate to this part, and so forth, and ensure that the day before submitting, I'm ready and this draft looks good and I'll submit it. Whereas person B decides, oh, well, it seems like there's a lot of work I have. How about I submit, I work on this quickly, and then I can submit it. And then when I get my superior will have enough time to review it, since she wanted it later anyway. And then I'll get some feedback and I'll work on it again to submit the final document. And so this person B decides that I'm going to submit it in 5 days. Well, the companies today are telling us that person B is something that they would like to really, talk to more about, because that's what the style of working is. The companies are talking about taking risks and being able to work in a way that they're submitting documents and work being done in their expectation and their kind of work culture it is. Mobility. Anytime, anywhere work. We can see that with the pandemic, we can now work from home. Companies, there was a recent research talked to a lot of companies, and I recently had a chance to talk to a bank, and they said that a lot of their staff members had to, within no time, they had to send everybody to work from home when the lockdown happened. And, with the updates that's coming from that team is that the work is going really well. And the productivity has not really been impacted. In fact, they're talking about the potential increase in the productivity for working from home. And if that's the case, then this might be the future of work, of mobility, working from anytime and anywhere. Globalization beyond boundaries. What do we really mean? Globalization has been something that's been going on for a while now. So why are we talking about it today? We're talking about it today is because it has significantly grown, and companies are seeing beyond boundaries and reduced barriers thanks to all the government and support that's getting, where they can now work with people from other different countries and expand the businesses. We can see one example where one of the largest IT companies from India is now going to come to Calgary very soon. Technologies, AI, cloud, automation, IoT, these might sound really different language to you, but it is something that has been a lot of buzzwords around these technologies and the changes that these technologies are bringing to the world today. Because of these technologies, a lot of changes we are seeing in a lot of workspaces, a lot of businesses, and so forth. The research shows that around 40% of tasks could be automated in a lot of professions. And therefore, the question comes, okay, why is that going to happen? Is because these technologies play a major role in how businesses are working today and how they're reaching their clients and their end goals. So a question comes to our mind, then if that's the case, then is this something that we should really fear? Is that something that we should be worried about? How is it going to impact us? Predictions are really 80% of retail displaced by 2030. Is that something that's really going to happen? We've started noticing that impact taking place already, but is it going to be to that extent as per what the research is saying? The fear is really infectious right now. And the change in jobs is what a lot of expectations, the predictions are over the change, over the significant, disruption of jobs to a certain extent, rather than just, minor changes. What is it? Is it going to completely, my job is going to be done by a robot, is what we ask ourselves, or is it going to be a certain percentage that's going to be automated? However, the job is going to be more impactful and more effective. Let's hear from Nageeb further on this topic.
Thanks, Sharmin. So first I want to say that, Sharmin hit the nail on the head with a lot of these different things that are really important when we talk about this topic, talking about the technology and the role of technology, but also the impact of these different technologies on all aspects essentially of work that we have, right? Whether it be where we work from, so the mobility of it, how we work, remotely. This is very different for a lot of people to be communicating via Zoom versus in a boardroom. Whom we work with, we would work with people who are very close to us in a physical space, but now, even myself included, we may find ourselves working with people who are geographically very separated from us, like Sharmin mentioned, going beyond those boundaries in a completely new way, right? Before, globalization was about having trade deals between, local and international partners. It might have meant something like, Apple outsourcing the manufacturing of their chips to Samsung based in, Asia. But now it means something completely different, where our colleagues, the people we work directly with on a day-to-day basis, are also very far away from us. So very well said by Sharmin. So this question of should we fear automation? I think, unfortunately, the answer to this is usually yes. Like, people have this notion that we should, absolutely, why not? Robots are terrible and they're going to take over our lives and our livelihood, and it's going to be a bit of an apocalypse. But I think that there's a big misconception there that automation is about replacing, human laborers entirely, and the future of work is just going to be that there's no work at all, and we will just be served essentially by these robots. And while it is well founded, given the ubiquity of autonomous machines like self-driving cars and robotic vacuum cleaners, we may think, hey, robots can do anything and everything, and they are doing more and more things. So it's not a matter of, how will they or will they, but more when will they replace us in the workforce. But it's important here to take a step back and realize that automation is not about replacing humans. It is about optimization of the tasks that companies don't find there's value in performing by a human, or tasks that a human might not be the most efficient at, for example. So in other words, companies are not trying to replace humans. Like Sharmin mentioned, it's all about that notion of optimizing the efficiency and the profits of the business, which is essentially just business. So in other words, it's important to note here that many companies are actually investing in automation to regain human capital from their employees. Taking those mundane tasks and making them automated is a good way to say, hey, now our employees can focus more of their time and attention on the things that only they can do, that a robot or a computer might not be able to do. And it's absolutely undoubtedly true that there are some companies out there who are simply looking to eliminate jobs. But it's not out of malicious intent, right? The reason that companies would want to eliminate workers is only to maximize profit and to maximize the value of employee output, which is just the nature of business. So that is just business, right? Business is just about maximizing profit and staying afloat, which right now a lot of companies are having a really hard time with, especially smaller local companies. And so it's important to note that although the introduction of robots and computers in the workplace is visible more so today than ever before, automation is by no means a new thing. So automation is not bad. And like I mentioned, automation is not new. It's just a little bit different this time, sort of. So when we look at automation, there have been several waves of automation technologies in the past, dating as far back to the Industrial Revolution. And the one thing that they have in common is that they coincide with waves of technological innovation. So when we think about things like we see here in this image of Industrial Revolution factories, that was a huge wave in mechanical technology that was coming into play, where these tasks that would take mill workers weeks or months would now be done in the span of days or a few days. And so during the Industrial Revolution, as factories were set up, the use of industrial machines actually increased, and many of these tasks were automated. Things that normally would be done by artisans would be done by machines. Even things like scripting, right, where you would have a scribe come and write a book for you and write many copies. The printing press made that possible to do that in an automated fashion. And contrary to what you might think about how all this means that these people would put out of work, it actually led to an increase in the number of jobs as product output and profit margins increased. Companies could afford to hire more people because they had the demand to. And we saw a similar wave again a little later with other technologies. So the same trend of increased employment was seen with the introduction of automated banking machines, for example, and with the rise of ATMs. Sure, some bank tellers may have lost employment, but because of the fact that ATMs make it cheaper to operate a branch and allow banks to serve their customers even outside of peak hours or operating hours, the number of branches that banks had increased. So in turn, bank teller employment overall also saw an increase because of the ability to serve more people more often. And therefore, there's an increase in the number of customers a bank might have, and also the revenue that comes in from that. And so as a result of the fact that there were fewer tellers required to operate each branch, banks decided, hey, if rather than having 7 employees, for example, at one branch, we only need now 3. Well, why don't we open another 2 branches and have now 3 branches, each run by 3 tellers? And so while locally this may have meant a reduction in the number of bank tellers employed at each branch, overall there was an increase of several hundred even tellers. So in the past, new industries we saw hired far more people than those that they put out of business. So the turnover was actually net gain. And while this seems like good news, if we dissect this a little bit further, we'll see that there is still an issue there. And the issue is that even though there were more tellers who were employed overall, there were still several tellers who were displaced by the work. Well, how is that? Well, a teller, let's say working in Red Deer, may have been displaced by an ATM. And that bank might have said, hey, well, let's open 2 more branches, but they opened them in Calgary. So, the teller who lost their job in Red Deer is very unlikely to have received the benefit of this increased employment demand elsewhere. So then how is the automation different now? Well, that's the first little cue, is that it's not necessarily the case that jobs that are created are going to be the identical jobs to those that are displaced. So that's the first little cue. The second little, or actually not little, the more important thing though, is that industries most affected by automation today have comparatively few jobs for the unskilled or underskilled compared to those in the olden days. It took a lot less skill, for example, to work as a physical laborer in a printing press as it does to work in a bank. And it takes more skill to work in a factory like we'll see today than it did in the past. So the level of skill required to perform tasks is a lot higher now than it was in the past. And that comes down to just the fact that technology is getting, more and more capable. So what careers do you anticipate being at risk of automation, and why? This is a question that we want you guys to just think about for a moment. I'm sure that when you hear automation, there's certain things, especially now that we've talked about a couple of examples, that might come to mind as soon as you hear this term automation. You might think, oh yes, that's the job. Those are the guys that are gonna be affected, and you might have good reasons to think that. So let's look at some examples of the kinds of people that might be at risk. So who's at risk? Well, unfortunately, 98% of the population is at risk of some form of automation. And like Sharmin mentioned earlier, that may not mean 98% of people are going to lose their job, but it does mean that 98% of people are going to be affected in some way, positively or negatively, by automation. And 50% of those people will probably see some form of significant automation in their workplace. So really, every job can be performed more efficiently and more precisely. So in other words, there's opportunities for automation everywhere, which means that there's a risk that every job could be automated. It doesn't really matter your age or your career stage, you are in to be impacted. That's essentially the takeaway from this slide here. And the question you should ask yourself is not, will my job be affected by automation, but rather, when will it be automated? And like Sharmin mentioned, to what extent? And that's really key to understand. It's not about othering that they will be affected and we will not. I'm a senior in my career, I won't be affected, or I've received, I'm on a tenure track, so I'm not going to be affected by automation. Even if you're on a tenure track, again, automation is not always negative, but you will experience some form of automation that you have to be ready for. So then what kinds of jobs are higher risk? Well, there's a graph here that talks a little bit about the kinds of occupations that are most at risk. We can see that office support workers are on one end of the spectrum, and then professional employees are on the other end of the spectrum. But really, the answer to the question is not as black and white as, you work here, you are going to be affected by automation, or you're at high risk position. To answer the question, there's a better way that we need to do that. We need to evaluate the jobs that we're doing. And as a rule of thumb, the harder your job is, the less likely you are to be negatively impacted by automation. And notice that I said that the less likely you are to be negatively impacted. It's not to say that you will not be impacted, but the harder your job is, the less likely you are to be negatively impacted by automation events. So in other words, your brain is your greatest defense against automation. So at the beginning of this presentation, we said that, we're talking about how to future-proof yourself against automation. Well, here's the first thing. Your brain is your greatest defense against automation. So let's go back to the example of the bank teller for just a moment. So the earliest iterations of bank machines, some of you may recall, were only used to dispense cash. So they did not automate much of a bank teller's job, right? Bank tellers still had many more complex tasks that they needed to do themselves. Things like withdrawing money or depositing checks. So tasks which would require more work or money or further technological advancement to automate were left unautomated at the time. So when we think about, for example, withdrawing money, well, why is that easy? Well, simple iterations of that technology, and we can remember back to this, that back in the day, when you wanted to withdraw funds, you could only do it in denominations of $20 or multiples of $20. So you couldn't withdraw $15. You would have to withdraw either 20 or 40. You know, you had to do it in multiples of 20. So essentially the reason for that is just that the technology wasn't able to handle that. What was happening in these ATMs is you had a stack of $20 bills, and a bank would just say, we need 10 of these bills. Go count 10 bills and dispense it. But it's a lot more work to say, well, I want to dispense $35, because to do that, you have to be able to distinguish a $20 bill from a $10 bill from a $5 bill, and then do some math to say, how many 20s, 10s, and 5s do I need to dispense that amount of money? So that was left unautomated. And the same was true for depositing, because you can't guarantee that someone is going to deposit in the denominations of $20. So you have to be able to then detect what the user is putting into the bank. So that was also left unautomated. So these tasks are a lot more complex to have technology solve them. The problem is a lot greater than the technology that was available at the time. But the ubiquitous nature of technology now has actually made even those tasks very easy to automate. Many of you will have in the past, I'm sure, withdrawn money in denominations that are not, $20 increments, or you may have deposited money at a bank through the machine rather than going to a teller. You may have deposited checks through your mobile apps, just taking a photo. So that is the nature of technology, that when we look at where we are and the kinds of things that we have to do, back in the day, tellers had the human capital to say, hey, we can deposit, we can withdraw, we can manage all of these complex tasks very easily. But today, that's not necessarily the case. So relative to then, they are now more likely to be affected negatively by automation. So another important thing there is to remember that so not only is the harder your job is to do, the less likely it is to be automated. The second thing is that it can change, and it will change. If today your job is not automated or cannot be automated, that does not mean that you are completely safe against the risks of automation. So let's look at a few examples of where automation exists in our world today, and then we can revisit that question again about how do you deal with that. So self-checkouts in grocery stores are a great example of automation, and many employees may have lost their jobs to these machines. Self-serve kiosks at restaurants that allow you to order, pay for, and interact with your server directly from your table using some sort of a technology platform like this here with Presto. They've actually taken it even a step further, and they allow you to play games. So if you have kids at your table, you no longer have those, coloring sheets that they have to interact with. Now they can just play games directly on the kiosk. So that's another example of automation of the work of restaurant workers. Things like chatbots and customer service platforms are another example. So not all automation is as blatant per se as things that we see when we go grocery shopping. There are many instances where automation is quite subtle. And here's an example, right? Chatbots or automated telephone systems have replaced many support teams, customer support teams rather. And that's both locally and offshore. So this is a very interesting example because it really puts into perspective that global ideology that Sharmin was mentioning earlier. Customer service is notoriously looked down upon for this exact reason, that it was taken offshore and a lot of this work was done by international employees. But now, actually, even that work is being automated. So it's not just us locally that are being affected by this automation technology. That's on a global scale. Everyone is impacted by that. And then speaking of, again, subtle examples, even something as seemingly insignificant as a robotic vacuum or a mop is a part of the current wave of automation. So though these seems like harmless hardware that only make tedious household chores less of a burden, they actually pose a threat to many residential cleaning service providers, for example. And although that seems really niche, it's important to take this as not only what it is at face value, but to also understand that a little bit more. So perhaps the more significant job automation is to be seen when technology like this is scaled, which is exactly what's happening. So we can see here that there are the equivalent robotic vacuum cleaners or mops that are actually functioning on a commercial scale. They're much larger, able to clean much larger spaces in a much more efficient and often with better results. They require less maintenance. So this technology, although it seems like a consumer product at first, has been scaled. And that's the thing with technology, is that it's very easy often to scale that. So wherever there's a market, there's going to be someone who will want to exploit it. And here's another thing. So not all jobs that are being automated are frontline jobs. So in fact, a large share of the jobs that are currently being automated and those that are the hardest hit by automation are actually manufacturing jobs along the various stages of the supply chain. So for example, here you can see Tesla's manufacturing plant, which is more machine than it is man. Much of their assembly line has been automated. In fact, I think it's something upwards of 65% of the assembly process has no requirement for human laborers. And again, keeping on that same trend of automation in the supply chain, I think it would be really good to take a look at this video very quickly and see kind of where we're headed with that and the extent to which automation is impacting us in the workplace.
This is a 1.3 square kilometer transit warehouse. The use of sorting robots improves efficiency, accuracy, and security during the sorting process, and also reduces manual labor costs by an astonishing 70%. This AI and logistics model is now revolutionizing the express delivery industry across the country.
So the video here shows a warehouse in China. However, many large companies in North America are employing similar logistics technologies in their own warehouses. Among them, of course, is the online retail giant Amazon. So Amazon Robotics has been pioneering warehouse automation technologies for about half a decade or so now. And as a result, has been able to achieve some remarkable improvements in efficiency and productivity, which is, again, like we mentioned earlier, one of the main purposes of automation. And it's actually reported that with the introduction of robots, Amazon has been able to increase the amount of stock they have by 50%, and they can retrieve items from within that stock 3 times faster than when they had human workers in their factories and in their warehouses. And they've also reduced their cost of product fulfillment by nearly 40%, which is remarkable. So what drives automation then? Why is this happening? You know, the question is perhaps the most important one to answer if we want to fully understand the potential impacts of automation in the days to come. So what's happened in the past is great. It can tell us a little bit about what might happen in the future. What's happening today is great to understand, but really we probably care the most about what's going to happen in the days to come. So there are really 2 main drivers of automation. The first is consumers, and the second is profits. So self-checkouts make shopping more convenient. Self-order systems make the dining experience more convenient. Robot cleaners make doing chores, easier, less of a burden. Chatbots make customer service more convenient. And all of these things have an added effect of increasing profit margin. Unfortunately, one of the main ways that these technologies increase profitability is by reducing the amount of human labor required to do things, replacing humans with technology analogs that are cheaper, more efficient, and more productive. So you might be thinking, well, that sounds absolutely terrible. And why should we then not fear automation? If you're saying that robots are going to come and replace us, why then should we not fear them? And we'll get to that in just a second. But it's important to just reflect on what's happening. And to be very honest, I'm not saying that there's no one who's going to be losing their jobs and that everyone who has a job will be able to work in perfect harmony with the robots that are going to come into play, whether they be computer software, technology pieces, or physical robots. Manufacturing and warehousing technologies like those employed by Tesla and Amazon not only reduce staffing requirements, they actually go a step further in that piece of increasing profitability by actually increasing workplace safety, meaning that less money is paid out in workplace injury settlements. And that's actually, there's some statistics that I think are interesting to look into for your guys, for your guys' information, about how the introduction of robots has actually reduced the frequency and severity of injuries in warehouses that they exist in. So these technology pieces cost money, and profit gains are speculative. You can't invest in a technology and say, if we do this, we will for sure 100% increase our profitability. Tesla had no idea before they introduced a robotic assembly line that was the best way to go. Or Amazon could not have predicted that they would be able to increase their profit margin by 40% through the introduction of robots. So why then do these companies do that? Well, they do that to meet customer expectations. And so what are those expectations? Well, when we're shopping on Amazon, for example, we have the expectation that we can get things delivered to us as fast as possible. So in order to deliver on that promise, literally and figuratively, Amazon has to find ways to increase the efficiency in their fulfillment process. Robots happen to be one of the options that they had available to them. Before they actually introduced robots, they saw that this was a tried and true technology. Amazon is not the first company to employ, robots in the warehouse for logistics. They just saw this as a huge opportunity. In fact, Amazon purchased out a company called Kiva and then rebranded it as Amazon Robotics. And that company, Kiva, was actually used by many other companies like The Gap and Walgreens and Staples in the States. So that was a tried and true technology. So that consumer expectation has driven the change that we're seeing. And there's also more simple explanations of that. So for example, tap to pay technologies that we see so ubiquitous today were actually only adopted by large companies in Canada quite a few years after their introduction in the US. And that's because of customer response to these technologies over there. And soon after, many smaller companies were almost forced to upgrade to this type of system just to meet the expectations of customers. I'm sure that some of you may have gone into a store and tried to tap and the cashier says, hey, we don't do tap, or our tap isn't working. And I know for myself, one of the things that comes to mind instantly is, how is that even possible in today's day and age that you don't have tap to pay? And I guess that's just because of this internalized expectation that I have that this is a technology that should exist everywhere, probably because of the convenience that comes with it, which is actually interesting because specifically with the tap to pay example, there's actually quite a few risks that are associated with activating things like tap to pay. If my card was to get stolen, someone could easily misuse it. But that's a risk that I'm willing to take for the convenience that I'm offered. So again, the technology is not about replacing human laborers. It's also about, automation is not just seen in the workplace, rather. Let me put it that way. Automation is not just about how can we make workers better, or how can we make our processes more efficient, it's also changing the way that we live our day-to-day lives and do simple tasks. So for example, Netflix has automated things that are seemingly simple, such as selecting a movie or streaming a movie. And as a consequence of them finding that opportunity in the marketplace and taking advantage of it, they've actually today employ over 9,000 workers. So there is a silver lining. Lots of people are, on the cusp where they're losing their work, but there's also several thousands of jobs being created by automation. Vacuum cleaning technologies like the Roomba and other commercial equivalents, they didn't just come into play out of thin air. Someone had to create them. There's a lot of R&D that goes into that, marketing, HR, sales, engineers that are being employed to work on the next iterations of those technologies. So there is a silver lining there, which is why we should not necessarily fear automation. So then, why is this a big deal now? Well, Sharmin already alluded to this a little bit earlier, but the pace of evolution is one of the scariest things that there is when it comes to automation. So, for example, in COVID, over the last, I guess, 18 months now, there's been more web automation that what was expected to have taken 5 or 6 years has taken only 12 to 18 months to happen as far as technology progression is concerned. And the other is, of course, that customer perspectives have shifted. And again, that idea of expectation and the adoption. So before, customers might not have been as receptive to technologies like Zoom or Skype. Skype has been around for several years before Zoom, but Skype isn't really something you hear too often. So why all of a sudden is video conferencing so ubiquitous? Well, it's because of necessity, right? We look at COVID and it's created a necessity. It's created a need for this technology. And because of that need, we have adopted these technologies and we actually expect it. So like Sharmin mentioned earlier, a lot of companies are making that shift towards digital work and working remotely. And it's not just going to be about working remotely temporarily. A lot of companies have permanently shifted to online work. And the second reason that it's a big deal now is because technological leaps are exponential. They're not linear. It's not a matter of today we can dispense bills from a machine. Tomorrow, maybe we'll be able to dispense any denomination. It went from we can dispense in $20 denominations to we can dispense, deposit, and also handle other transfers and other transactions all at once. So change, we might expect small little increments of change, but often that's not the case. We may see huge leaps in the evolution of the technology. And as a result of that, upskilling is harder now than it has ever been, because the tasks that are being automated are no longer just tasks that are menial. Previously you may have heard of the old adage about pencil pushing. Well, no longer are we replacing pencil pushers. We are today replacing entire customer service staff. Office workers as a whole are at risk rather than just small pieces of their jobs. So upskilling is harder now because the tasks that are being automated are tasks that are a lot more meaningful, that are harder to perform, that require more mental capacity. And those are being automated thanks to technologies like Sharmin mentioned, AI, machine learning, and so on and so forth. So as a result of the fact that these tasks that are being automated are not menial tasks, we need to stay ahead of that, and we need to be able to do even harder tasks. And of course, the harder a skill is to learn, well, the harder the skill is to learn. So again, we're focusing on what's happening today with hopes of understanding what could happen tomorrow. So let's take a moment to just look at some of those different examples of where we are headed and what tomorrow could look like. So here's a glimpse into the future. This is actually something that exists today. Sobeys smart carts that allow shoppers to, not only use these carts to grab items and haul them around the store, but also to check out as you're doing it. Through using these technologies, a user can essentially scan items as they put them into their cart, and before they leave, just tap to pay, or use the chip reader to pay, and you're out. You don't have to wait in a lineup. You don't have to worry about even self-checkout lines. So this goes even a step further than that self-checkout technology that we talked about earlier. This is the next step. And a step further than this is actually Amazon Go stores that exist also in the States, where users can just start a session on their phone, go in, take whatever they want off the shelf. They don't even have to scan it, and they can just walk out. It's as simple as that. You go in, you grab what you want, you leave, your credit card is charged. It's just that simple. And people think, oh, Amazon Go, that's a one-off. But actually, there's many analogs all across the world of similar stores, whether it be in the Netherlands or in China. Others are taking on this technology. They are adopting it. They're learning from it. And that same idea that applies to tap to pay, where smaller companies had to adapt, same thing applies here. If Sobeys decides to have this technology and customers respond in a positive way, if they like it, then you can almost guarantee that Superstore, Walmart, Safeway, and everyone else is going to have similar technologies as well. So these are really a glimpse into the future. Here we can see MRI scans, but what this is meant to represent is actually a technology created by IBM Watson, which was a AI machine that could make radiology predictions just using machine learning. And it actually was able to do so with greater efficiency than radiologists. And this was a project that was initially released, I believe, half a decade ago now, that was shelved. But it wasn't shelved due to inaccuracy of the readings or due to a fatal flaw in the technology. It was actually only shelved due to concerns around patient privacy. Like, there wasn't enough clarity about what was happening with the data that was being collected here. But like we mentioned earlier, we're seeing shifts in user adoption. People are becoming more comfortable with their data kind of existing in the world. We are, of course, constantly being tracked through all the different platforms that we engage with. So perhaps we could see technology like this come back into play. And this is important to realize because a radiologist is quite a revered job. It's quite respectable. It requires a lot of mental acumen for sure, lots of years of training. So if jobs like that could be automated, that really is a testament to the fact that no one is really safe. Everyone is at risk to some degree of automation. So this sort of brings us to the next question that is important to realize, which is, what skills do you think will be important for the jobs of the future? So having seen several examples, having heard a little bit more about the technology side of things, we can focus on this now. Okay, we've talked about what the problem is, if there is one, and now we're coming down to that solution. So I'll turn it over to Sharmin, since she's the expert here, and she can share her 2 cents with us.
Thanks, Nageeb. Wow, that was really enlightening. And I'm gonna watch out for all those carts and stuff when I go to the stores for sure. Definitely something that I like to do. Even if I have a cart full of groceries, I most likely am leaning towards going to a self-checkout, because I feel like I'm in control and I'm fast and it's my time and pace, as compared to me getting frustrated of the other person being ahead of me.
Absolutely.
And so, I can definitely see myself do that, and I do that very often. But now that we've heard so much about the automation side of it, the jobs that have evolved over time, be it the printing press, be it the ATMs, and so forth, it is very important to know that in that case, then how can we future proof? What is it that we have that is our strength? Like Nageeb said, definitely the brain is our strength, and that stores a lot of skills that we have. It is very important because in our career development world, we talk a lot about transferable skills. This is the time to actually realize and understand what these transferable skills actually are, especially the ones that are so much in demand tomorrow. Did you know the research along with all of this says that 60% of jobs tomorrow are going to be all centered around the soft skills? A lot of experts in the future of work argue that, hey, if it's so soft, why is it so difficult? So why not we call it equivalent to hard skills, or why not we call it essential skills or power skills? Technically mean the same thing. I love the word power skills, so I use it now. But what are these power skills that the future of work experts are talking about, people in the tech industry, the startup companies, and so forth? What are all these so important skills? Is it something that we really need to go to school for? Is it something that we have and we really need to enhance? Perhaps the latter makes more sense. It is something that we really have. People, even the jobs that are getting fully automated, like drivers, definitely will find a lot of these interesting skills that they have, which really need to be recognized, used further to enhance, upskill, and move into other kind of positions. Presentation skills, personality, persist. All of these skills can be combined into 4 groups that is suggested by the World Economic Forum report. 4 key areas. One of the key area is really self-management. 94% leaders report that their expectation of employee upskilling is high. This means that 94% of leaders are looking for employees who have growth mindset, motivation of self-development. At the end of the day, they're telling you, are you able to control yourself? Are you able to control the decisions that you make? Are you able to adapt to anything different, anything new? I remember I had a client, had a conversation with them. They're working for about a year at a contract. Interestingly, they had he was telling me that they implemented a software to help them track and customer data and details and so forth. And within a couple of months, they realized that software, they found another software that they were told that it's really better and beneficial and it's going to help us, even more. And they started using the second software. Come to realize that the first one was better. And so they stopped using the second one and then they went back to the first one. This really means that, and the first one also got a lot more evolved by the time they started using it. What does this mean? This really means that companies are looking at people who can really learn, unlearn, and probably relearn the skills that are really needed, because the change is so evident and so different. If you think about resiliency and adaptability, these are the topmost skills that the companies are highly requesting for a lot of their new staff members and even the current ones to be able to grow into. Basically, being adaptable to change is equally important as being efficient in your kind of work that you're doing. If you're adaptable, doesn't mean that you are not efficient in what you know, but what it's trying to show is that you can adapt to something different that is being implemented in the organization, right? And adaptable to situations that have happened, across the organization. One of them that Nageeb talked about, pandemic that happened, and we all had to go online. Did one adapt really easily to the online platform and is able to now work efficiently as they were working in the regular work related mindsets? So self-control, self-management is something that the organizations are highly looking for. What is the second key area that these organizations talk about? That is working with people. So, we always talk about, and I think most of the jobs that I have come across is most of the jobs, I would, not even exaggerate and say that in my life I've come across, and 90% talk about communication skills. Every other job will ask you what we really require is strong strength communication skills. What are these? Why is this so important? In fact, even more than yesterday, today and tomorrow are these communication skills going to be significantly important. Why is that so? Yesterday, I could be sitting next to a colleague of mine in the same workstation and just say hi. Every morning, walk by and say hi to a receptionist and walk in. But is that something that will be on tomorrow as well with this change of mobility, work anytime, anywhere? May not be the case. May not be that I'll just quickly go grab a glass of water and on my way I'll just say hi to somebody in the corridor. But if that's not going to happen, then the small talk, which is such an important part of our culture here in Canada, is going to be challenged. Day-to-day communication and team members' strength is going to be challenged. Do you think only a team building session will be beneficial, or does that really require day-to-day communication? And if that's the case, then platforms like Slack and Teams are being extremely important, because you may not be able to meet your colleague in the corridor, but you'll be able to schedule a coffee with them or just drop in a line, say hi in a chat box. That is something that's going to be very beneficial. I feel like I work in such a big organization, but I'm now more connected to the people within other parts of the organization, which is really far away from me. We're online because I can just easily search them on a chat and message them, as compared to really the odds of me meeting them at the campus are really low. And therefore, working with people is going to be extremely important. And these people could be any of your stakeholders, from your clients to to the other businesses and so forth. Yeah. And your teams might also be across the border with this globalization, for sure. Third skill area, problem solving. A very fast emerging skill that you will notice on a lot of job descriptions tomorrow are problem solving skills. Basically, what is it? It is really nothing but underlying issues that our organization has, than just identifying the symptoms of those issues. So you really want to know that what is the core of the problem, what is something that's really impacting significantly to a person. And therefore, problem solving any kind of small to big challenges could be really need to be solved by an organization using problem solving skills. Fourth skill, technology use. Back in the day, technology was like a good to have, maybe an asset. Even before that, didn't even exist, and then wasn't good to have an asset. And tomorrow, they're saying that technology is one of the most important areas, regardless of the profession you're in. It is equivalent to any soft skill that you would be having. And therefore, IT skills, any technology related skills, are going to play significant role in one person's profession, be it construction, healthcare, and a lot more. And therefore, these all skills will be playing a key role when we talk about future-proofing ourselves, our careers in the age of automation. What are the jobs in demand? There are, according, Nageeb talked about a lot of jobs. These are some stats to give you: 85 million jobs displaced. But just like Nageeb said, that if it's 85 million jobs being displaced and 95 million jobs being created, they might not be for the same skilled person, but these people can definitely upskill themselves to meet the demands of those jobs. And for example, very interestingly, and where are all these jobs created and why are all these jobs created? A quick example is restaurant delivery problem. So restaurants noticed that, they had significant delivery issues, that they could, hiring somebody for delivery was a significant cost, because they're sitting idle. The drivers, they may not be needed all the time, because there are times of the day that they're busy and they're not. So how does it work with delivery? It wasn't something that all restaurants would always serve, but they would like to serve ideally, because that does help their businesses a lot. And then came the idea of skip the dishes, door dashes, and all of those came into being. that was significant help. If you see during the pandemic, especially, that they were able to still continue their businesses. Yes, we did lose a lot of restaurants, but we still were able to save a lot of restaurants. And therefore, things like delivery services were of significant help. But with the delivery services, restaurants also noticed that there is a challenge. Guess what the challenge is? Now all these delivery service companies are so different. DoorDash uses their own platform, Skip the Dishes uses their own platform, Uber Eats uses their own platform. So what can we do about this? Well, another startup company decided, why not we help the restaurants put all of these platforms in one platform? And that solves a major problem of a restaurant to manage all of these platforms individually. And that really benefits the organization, the restaurants adapting to all of these other skills. And that is only, if you're noticing, what's it doing is it is significantly increasing jobs available. And because of these companies coming into play, they are creating more and more jobs. And because they're creating more and more jobs, it is good to see that therefore there's a challenge in terms of skills growth, and therefore the kind of skills that's really required is being challenged. Well, the government, the organizations, the federal government, and so forth, is doing a lot of interesting efforts, which we'll see in a bit, to ensure that we have the skills and these people who are displaced can get an upskilling done to ensure they meet the demands of tomorrow, and we're still able to grow as a country and as a province. By 2030, research shows that AI will lead an estimated 15.7 trillion or a 26% increase in global GDP, which is significant. And you can see that Alberta is having a high increase in all of these AI companies and so forth. AI companies are on a significant increase in our province and in our cities. What is the percentage that shows right now? Alberta's ICT spending grew by 4.9%, 3 times faster than the country's overall economic growth. We can go on to the next slide. Tech is one of the fastest growing industry in Canada. And you can see that Alberta saw a significant amount of investment, which is $227 million in 2019, and several deals. These are all fundings that go to these organizations that are significantly growing. And a lot of them are based out of Alberta. Calgary Economic Development received $100 million funding to help startups, help companies that really are showing future growth, as well as help people upskill their talent, and investment in programs that is going to help people get more digitally skilled. Because a lack of digitally skilled talent is seen as the biggest obstacle in terms of business growth by over 35% of employers in Alberta. And this was followed by lack of business development and sales skills workers. If you want to know a little bit more about a lot of research done across Canada, you can take a look at Brookfield report that is out, and we'll be happy to share the last slide that has more information where you can get all these resources from. But feel free to read reports that are talking about future of work, the impact of it, and what it would look like in the future. The 10 most in-demand jobs, though, according to research in Alberta, are going to be software development, data scientist, machine learning engineer, cybersecurity analyst, and so forth. Now comes the question, in the end, when we ask ourselves, what do you do about it? All of this is happening now that we know the significance of it, now that we know that these are the challenges. How can we solve the problem? Well, in order to solve the problem, it is extremely important to understand, to recognize and understand the problem, which we did right now towards the entire presentation. We really understood the problem. Now you need to understand yourself, where you stand in this whole situation. Look at your job. Look at the research done. Where is my profession? Where is my career? Where do I fall in this whole? Am I at a high risk? Am I at a medium risk? Am I at a low risk? Even if I'm at a low risk, it's still a risk, like Nageeb said, it's still a risk, which means that how can I prepare not to fall into that situation? Furthermore, because the evolution of this technology is at a very fast pace. It has happened very significantly and very fast. And therefore, even if you're at low risk, it is highly important to analyze and evaluate yourself. And what better than us career development specialists can help our clients do that? All the more important that career development specialists were in the past. Even today, it is even more important that we pull up our socks and help our clients with this challenge that they're going to be facing, and some of them are already facing, especially in Alberta. Ask hard questions, ask very difficult questions. What does it impact me? How much? What do I know? Where do I stand? How much can I devote myself to upskill myself or reskill myself? What is required? Is there any support outside? Explore the market. What are all of these professions that I named? Are they so difficult to get into? Do I need to go back to a 5-year school? Probably not the answer, because there are lots of support available. There is online programs and there are upskilling programs in town that we can ensure that our clients are very well aware about. And to conclude that, we would like to share with you some of the programs that we are aware of that are available in the market. One of them is definitely with SAIT. When this challenge happened recently, last year, a philanthropist named David Bissett decided to give $30 million to SAIT and join with SAIT, hands with SAIT, to support a lot of people who were displaced in order to help them find a next step and next jobs. And this initiative was also supported by Calgary Economic Development, which gave in another $8 million of funding to help mid-career professionals find next steps. And so please go to the SAIT School for Advanced Digital Technology website for more information on what programs do we have to help our clients upskill and gain those skills that are going to be helping them tomorrow to continue their career here in Alberta. Another program that is there in town, which I'll let Nageeb talk about, is with Making Changes Association.
Yes. So with Making Changes Association, we work with immigrant and Indigenous women to train them in full stack web development. Right now, we're currently on the 3rd cohort. And our focus really is to take in-demand skills, like Sharmin mentioned. It's not just about taking skills and learning new skills, but important to ask those hard questions, explore the market. So we've done a lot of the market research. That's one of the things that Sozentech, the company for which I am the COO, is really focused on, is doing the job market research to identify key areas of personal growth, and then creating curriculum around that, and then facilitating that curriculum through other organizations or even through our own organization. We hold boot camps and workshops of our own as well. But with Making Changes Association in particular, we run the Women in Technology program that is really focused on taking these in-demand skills of web development and software development, which is one of the top 10 skills or jobs that Sharmin mentioned just a moment ago, and really condensing that into a program that is very approachable for people who have no background. So our mission is really just to take that and make it as accessible as possible, so that challenge that Sharmin mentioned of, do I need to go back to a 5-year program, or, can I afford to be unemployed while I go and upskill or reskill, is as small of a barrier as possible. And I know that's the same with Sharmin's program at SAIT as well. And that's the same as we try to achieve with all of the things that we do at Sozentech as well.
Great. Yeah, so that was amazing. Please do check out all these programs. If there are any that can really help your clients, do refer them to us. Our contact information will be on CDA website along with this, and we would love to answer your questions and that you may have, at the end. Thank you so much for joining us, and all the best with the future endeavors. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.